Hello, everybody. Welcome to PowerShell Wednesday, your weekly PowerShell meetups. We've been doing them all year long, every single Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We are here on LinkedIn and Discord talking about PowerShell. And today we have a very special guest. But before I get to that, or rather than guest, I should say speaker. But before I get to that, I want to tell you about next week. Next week, we have Stephen Judd joining us, and he'll be talking about scopes, what they are, because you may not know what scopes are, how to use them, what you should be aware of, some ways that they can kind of bite you in the back. So before we get to that, though, we have this week's presentation, which is Sean Wheeler, lead documentarian on PowerShell at Microsoft. And he is going to be talking to us today about profiles and how to create one profile script that can follow you across all the OSs and a lot of tips along the way. And profiles are a very important topic because it's kind of like how you customize your PowerShell experience. And if you can take it with you across multiple OSs, oh my goodness, that's even better. Sean, welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, let's get started. So I dropped a couple of links in the chat. The first one is a link to you want to share the screen? Yeah, a link to this website where I have all of the presentations that I've written and given to various user groups and conferences. And I just want to point out at the end here are in this resources and links is a link to everything that I talk about and show today. Even my demo scripts that I'm going to be using are there for you to look at and download from here. So let's dive right in and just start talking about the PowerShell profile. PowerShell, there are 4 different profiles. We're not going to go into a whole lot of detail about these different ones, but you can build a multi-tiered approach to your profiles in your enterprise if you wanted to manage your profiles for all your users. So you could create a base profile that works for all users and all hosts, and then one that works for all users and specific hosts, and so on. And these get run in the order that they're listed. So the all users, all hosts gets run first, and then the other one. So the last one that runs can overwrite anything that happened in the previous ones. Most people just use current user, current host. You can read more about it here in the About Profiles article. And I have a bunch of demo examples in here, but we're going to do this live. So let's jump to the demo real quick, and I'll just show you here. I'm running, as you can see, PowerShell 7.5.1 and in VS Code here. And if we take a look at the profile, so $profile is a built-in variable in PowerShell that has the stores the location of all of the 4 of those profiles. Now, just a piece of trivia, Andrew, do you know what type $profile is?
It's not just a string. I'm not sure. I know it has multiple properties that aren't typically displayed.
It is a string.
Oh, is it?
Yes. But what it is a string. You can see that PowerShell adds these note properties to the string. So it's actually a string object with multiple properties added to it. And by default, if you just did $profile, you get the current user, current host value. So a little piece of trivia that most people don't realize.
Interesting.
So let's talk about differences across versions of PowerShell. Of course, Windows PowerShell is the oldest version that we support, and it's built on .NET Framework. PowerShell 7 is built on .NET. And so there are some compatibility differences, and then there's differences across platforms. But Some of the things, there's features that have been added to PowerShell 7, like new special character escape sequences. So backtick E is for the escape character. Backtick U allows you to specify any Unicode character code point by putting those in the curly braces, the hex value in curly braces. There's new commandlets that have been added to PowerShell 7. There's no longer the WMI commandlets like get WMI object and so on. Those are no longer in PowerShell 7. You need to be using the sim commandlets. Sim commandlets module ships in PowerShell 5.1, and you should be transitioning your WMI scripts to use sim commandlets so that they'll work in future versions. And then support for workflows was removed in PowerShell 7, so you can no longer do that. There's other commandlets that have changed. Test connection, invoke the web commands, invoke REST method, invoke web request. We've added dash parallel option to for each object, which was kind of one of the features that most people used in workflows. And then there's experimental features and such. And we'll take a look at all of these in more detail. So let's switch over to the script and look at some version differences. One of the things you'll notice is there's some new variables in PowerShell 7. If I hit F8 here, we have these is variables, is Linux, is macOS, is Windows, is core CLR. And if I switch over here to, this is PowerShell 5.1, and we run this, well, you see, I still have those, but let me run PowerShell -no profile. Excuse me. So you see, none of those is variables exist by default. So I've added those in my profile. We'll look at my profile later, but those come in really handy. Some other things, if you look at, for example, the syntax of invoke REST method. In PowerShell 5.1, you see that there is one parameter set. There's several parameters here. And if we were to count the parameter sets, that you see there's one and there's 34 parameters. But let's do that in PowerShell 7.5. I'm going to run these. Notice that there's 4 parameter sets and 58 parameters. There's a lot more going on here. A lot more capabilities. And if we look at test connection, you see we've got a bunch of parameter sets, and we can ping, and we can trace route, we can get the MTU size, we can try to connect to a TCP port. There's support for IPv6, and notice that the target name is the parameter. If we go back to PowerShell 5.1 and look at it, there's only 3 parameter sets, and its computer name is the parameter that where you specify the host name that you want to test. So things have changed quite a bit.
Hey, Sean, I have a question. Yeah. What is the core CLR?
Core CLR is, well, it'll be for .NET Core, essentially, .NET versus .NET Framework. And also there's the core PowerShell edition. There's some modules that don't work in core, like Windows core server that's headless. So that's just another thing that you can test for, because there's some modules you'll see in the PowerShell gallery. They'll say whether they support core or not. Okay, experimental features. So if I tried to run this command in Windows PowerShell 5.1, of course, it doesn't exist. But in PowerShell 7, we have all kinds of experimental features that you can turn on and off. And this is how new features get added. Escape sequences. This is another thing that's a little bit different. So escape sequences allow you to do ANSI coloring. So this is another way to create colorized text. And so in PowerShell 7, I can use the backtick E to create escape sequences, but that doesn't work here, as you can see. So what we have to do in 5.1 is we can define variable, or we use this kind of notation because we want the escape character by itself. And then I can do it this way. Now, this version will also work in PowerShell 7. So if I define the escape variable and then use it here, it still works, but you have this nice backtick notation that's a little easier to read. We talked about there's some new operators. So you have these chain operators, the and or. So what this does, I'm going to start Notepad here. And you'll see I have Notepad and it's running. And what this does is it says it's going to get Notepad, and if that succeeds, get the Notepad process. If that succeeds, then I want to stop the process. If that doesn't succeed, then it will do nothing. And it stopped the Notepad process that was running. I should have left it on the screen. So I'm going to start it up again. There it is. And you can see it hanging out over here. We'll run this again, and that stops it. Now, what the double pipe does, that's a chain operator for or. It says get Notepad, and if it doesn't exist, I'm going to do the next step and run that. So now we have an instance of Notepad again. And then there's the ternary operator. This is just a shorthand way of doing, let me close that down. Shorthand way of doing an if statement. So what this says is, if this evaluates to true, then return path exists, else return path not found. So I'm going to run that. And we can see that my profile file exists, but my all users, all hosts, if I run that, it does not exist. And then there's null coalesce. We'll skip this. You can read more about it in the documentation. this is stuff that was borrowed from C#. C# developers use these features a lot. All right. So let's talk about, that was the version differences. Let's talk about the platform differences. So with Windows, so on non-Windows platforms, you don't have, there's several commandlets and modules that aren't available on non-Windows platforms. There's no sim commandlets module on non-Windows platforms. You don't have the graphical element command, so there's no out grid view, and you can't use the -show window parameter of of get help on non-Windows platforms. There's no such thing as authenticode or execution policy on non-Windows. So authenticode signatures are just ignored. Windows is not case sensitive. Now PowerShell is mostly not case sensitive, but it's case preserving. There's only rare cases on Windows where PowerShell is case sensitive. But on non-Windows, Linux and macOS are very case sensitive. So file system is case sensitive and environment variables are case sensitive. There may be other places. So you have to take that into account. Whoops. There's differences in aliases that get defined. There's PowerShell jobs exist on both platforms, Windows and non-Windows, but there's no process backgrounding or job backgrounding in the same way as you get on Unix-based platforms. There's separator characters and line endings are different between the two platforms. And with environment variables on non-Windows, there's only one environment scope. And if you want those to persist across PowerShell sessions, you should add them to your profile script. So let's take a look at this in practice. So on Windows, as you know, the path environment variable is contains a list of paths that will be searched to find executables. And if you on Windows, the list of paths is delimited by a semicolon. So if I run this command here, you see I get a list of all of my paths. Well, let's run this now in Ubuntu. This is PowerShell 7.5.0 running on Ubuntu. If I run this same command, I get nothing. Because on Linux, the path separator is a semicolon. Excuse me, is a colon instead of a semicolon. So let's run this. Well, why didn't I get anything? I could, if we try to look at the environment variable F8, it doesn't exist. Well, environment variables are case sensitive on Linux. So it's all uppercase. There's my path on Linux. Now, .NET has a static property on the system.io path class that returns the path separator for the platform you're on. So you can see if we just look at this path separator, it's colon. So you can write your code this way and it will work on either platform. There's other static members of system.io path. There's the directory separator. a list of invalid characters, the path separator, and the volume separator. Excuse me. So if we wanted to take a look at those, let's see what they are. So you can see the directory separator, this is Windows, is backslash, path separator is semicolon, volume separator, that's for the drive letter, that's colon. If we look at this on Ubuntu, / and colon for the path separator. We can look at what's invalid characters. So on Linux, null is the only invalid character, but if we look at Windows, all of these characters are invalid. In a path. And let's look at new lines. On Windows, it's carriage return line feed. On Linux, it's just line feed. So now this is a sore spot between me and Mr. Judd. Aliases. On Windows, you have all of these helper aliases that get defined. Let me clear the screen here. And if we take a look at this, I'll hit F8 and we do a get command on these. You see, these are all aliases that point to PowerShell commands. But if we tried to use these commands on Linux, what do we get? These are all native commands. So the output you get from ls in Linux, let me do -al, is very different. And this is just plain text. So if I pipe that to get member, you'll see that this is just plain text on Linux. But whoops. If I do ls and pipe that to get member on Windows, I get my system file info, system directory info objects. Because it's running, ls is running get child item. But profile script is a script. You shouldn't be using aliases in your profile, in any scripts. Host differences. This is one of my pet peeves. I see a lot is that people use $host or get host to get the version of PowerShell. And I'm going to clear my screen here. I'm in Windows. And if we do $host, you see, okay, it says I'm version 751, and that's the correct version of PowerShell. But really what that is that is the version of host, this system.management.automation internal host object. And for example, if you were in the ISE, or in this case, this is the PowerShell extension terminal, and we do $host. You see it's version 2025.3.0. I should have just run my examples here. You can see they don't match. So if you're trying to check the version of PowerShell by looking at the host, you're doing it wrong. There's also differences in capabilities of the host, like the ISE, for example, doesn't support the progress bar, and it doesn't support ANSI escape sequences. I think there's other things. That's why you should be using VS Code anyway. But yeah, they are different beasts. So let's talk about some best practices here. Let's see, do I have? Yes. This is where we get into your favorite, Andrew, talking about PS default parameter values. So PS default parameter values is a built-in variable in PowerShell. It's an array. No, excuse me. It's a hash table of key value pairs where the key is the name of the command colon the parameter for that command. And the value is the value that you would pass to that parameter. So it allows you to set default values for various parameters. For example, the default encoding in PowerShell 7 is UTF-8. And for cross-platform compatibility, when I'm running in Windows PowerShell 5.1, I want it to be UTF-8 as well, because the default in Windows PowerShell is the ANSI Unicode, what is it, Win 1252 character set. It's not the same. So by setting this value here, I don't have to pass that on the command line, and anything I pipe to out file will automatically be UTF-8. Also, the CSV commands, the default on PowerShell 7 is no type information. And I don't like to include type information in my CSV output. So by setting this to true on Windows 5.1, it's automatically added. That's something I don't have to add on the command line. So this can be very powerful. However, beware, you can shoot yourself in the foot. And you'll notice here, I used to do the no element parameter on group object, and I shot myself in the foot because I couldn't get at the grouping information. So I have commented that out in my default parameter values. What else? Oh, this is also where you can customize your prompt. We'll take a look at some examples where I've customized my prompt. Prompt is just a built-in function that's predefined for you. And that's what gives you the command line. Oops. This part of your prompt on the command line. But you can do all kinds of fun stuff with prompts. Justin Grody has done several presentations on that. He's got all kinds of wild prompts. Some other things that you may want to do. This is one of the things I do is I keep my profile scripts in Git for version control. And what I do is I've created a symbolic link in my profile folder location that links to the file in my Git repo. So I don't have to worry about syncing my changes between the two. So let's take a look at my example profile and talk about all the different things I do in my profile. So I've got it divided up into regions to make it easier to navigate. I'm going to go ahead and fold. What's going on here? Fold all regions, and we'll step through this. So I start with global settings that I want. I add this here to turn on TLS 1.2 and TLS 1.3 support in my PowerShell sessions. The next section I have here is where I establish the version specific information. So here I'm testing my PowerShell version to see if I'm running on PowerShell 6 or higher. Or excuse me, this is testing for if it's less than 6. So I'm on PowerShell 5.1. This is where I'm creating all of those is variables. Now, one of the things that PowerShell 7 added for doing all the ANSI colorization is $PS style, where there's all these predefined values for you, and you can build colorized strings using things like $PS style dot foreground red world $PS style dot reset. So that's a way to get red text. And I didn't have to know the escape sequences for that. That would be nice to have in PowerShell 5.1, but you don't have it until now, because I created a module that you can install from the gallery called PS Style, and then you have all of the same capabilities here that you can use in your scripts on PowerShell 5.1. And then I'm doing some configuration of PS readline. There's this weird thing in PowerShell 5.1 where the name of PS readline, the version that ships in Windows, had a lowercase l. The new version has an uppercase L. And if you want update help to work properly, you need to import it with the uppercase L name. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm unloading the default one and reloading it. Weird kind of bug, but that's the workaround. And I'm setting my options here for my prediction source to be history, because PowerShell 5.1 doesn't support the prediction source plugins. If I'm on 7.2 or higher, then I can use the history and plugin, and I can import some other predictor modules like this completion predictor. For OS specific here, now this is where those is variables come in. If this is running on Windows, then I want to map some extra registry drives, HKCR for HKey classes root, and HKU for HKey users. Here I'm creating this is admin variable that checks to see whether I'm running elevated or not. So do I have the administrator role? And I'm registering some argument completers to help me. This is for winget, actually. And then if it's Linux, there's some modules that I want to import that are specific to Linux. I do a bunch of stuff with Git. I'm using PoshGit. PoshGit customizes the prompt. And so I'm setting some things here for PoshGit, some configuration. And I'm loading the completion provider for the GitHub CLI. And yes, Justin, my profile takes a long time to load. It, um, on a fast day, it is like about 8 seconds. Um, but it can be even longer than that because my Git setup scans all of my repos, and that's a whole nother presentation for another day. PS Readline settings. This is my next. So I like the keyboard mapping that PS Readline defaults to for Windows. And I want that same keyboard mapping to work cross-platform. So what I've done here is I've created this hash table of all, this is the PS Readline function name. And then the value is the key chord that we're going to bind that function to. And for example, menu complete on Windows is Control Spacebar, but when you hit Control Spacebar on Linux and macOS, it doesn't uh, it doesn't send Control Spacebar. It sends Control 2. So this is mapping Control 2, and you can map multiple chords to a single command. So that's what this for each loop does, is it goes through all the values in the hash table here and adds that key chord for those commands. And then I also have a history handler function that I'm adding here. This is one that I got from Dongbo, who's one of the devs on PS Readline and the PowerShell team. And so what this is doing is, if the line, the command I typed at the command line is greater than 3, but doesn't end with a space or a semicolon, then I'm going to add that to PS Readline's history and history file. Otherwise, if it is 3 or less, and this is, or if it begins with a space or ends with a semicolon, then it'll be in the memory of history only, but not in the history log file. So that's a way I can keep some commands, short commands that are just noise, like cd and dir and so on, keep those out of my history file. But I can also decide, if I'm like putting a password or something on the command line, if I put a space in front of the command, then it doesn't end up in the log file. I have a section here where I'm setting all my color themes. This again is just more PS Readline options. You may notice that, why am I doing this here inside of curly braces and invoking it with the ampersand? And I've done that in several places throughout the script. I do this because, and this will get into scopes next week with Steve and Judd. When your profile runs, it runs in the current scope. It's like you did a dot source on the script file. That means every variable you create in your profile script ends up in your global scope. And I don't want to pollute my global scope with a bunch of temporary variables. So I do that by putting them inside of a script block and then invoking the script block. Prompts. We'll get. I have 4 different prompts, and what I did was I created this hash table of prompt functions that you see here, and I have a helper function that allows me to switch between them. And we'll take a look at that as a demo here in a minute, but I've got some sophisticated prompts. We talked about the default parameter values. There they are set. I have some helper functions and aliases that are used within the script. They have to be defined. I tried to, my utility functions and stuff, I've tried to move out to separate modules, but there's some things that need to be here in the profile, used in the profile before I've loaded my modules. So I have those defined. Let's see. Where's collapse the region? And then the last is, this is where I set up all of my Git repo information. And this is the part of my script that takes the longest to run, because I have like 80 something repos that it scans. Now, I don't scan them every time PowerShell starts. What I've done is this function creates a hash table in as a global variable, and I have other scripts that use that information. But what I do is I save that global variable out to a CLI XML file, and if the age of that file is less than 8 days old, I just load it from cache so that I don't have to rescan everything. So that makes my profile go much faster. So let's look at my prompts here. This is the default prompt everybody's familiar with, but I have a helper function, not swap, switch prompt. And I can choose between my various prompts. So I have, this is the default PoshGit prompt. So what PoshGit does is it shows you when you're in a Git repo, it shows you what branch you're on and what the current state of the branch is. So there's no new files, there's 2 modified files and no deleted files. And this is red, so it means they're not tracked. And this hasn't been synced with GitHub. If we switch to the simple prompt, I use this, and it's just the PS with the greater than sign. When I'm writing documentation, I'll often switch to the simple prompt so I can copy paste examples that I've run and put that in the documentation. And then there's my prompt. So what my prompt is showing you is I'm using the features of PoshGit to get the same Git information. But I also have here the name of the repository as well as the branch name. And I'm decorating different elements here. So if I, you see, if I hover, it's showing a URL. If I do control click, it launches my browser in that repo. And on the path here, rather than showing me the full path, so if I do pwd, my current path is d:\git my repos Sean on IT. I shorten that. So if I go into, say, the content folder, I don't need to see the front of this. I know I'm in a Git repo. I just want to see where relative to the repo root I am. And you notice it's underlined. If I do a control click, it launches Windows File Explorer in that location. So you can do some fun stuff with ANSI escape sequences and customizing your prompt. And I think that's it, Andrew. Happy to take questions.
Yes. So what are you using for that fancy prompt? Is it PoshGit?
PoshGit gives me the Git information, and then I'm just I'm customizing what information PoshGit is going to display for me. So I'm choosing the colors and the information that ends up on the prompt. and it's a 2-line prompt. So the status information is here, and then the actual path, location, and input is on the next line.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's really important to customize your prompt if you want to get more information that's helpful. And I like that two-liner approach. Like if you have a lot of stuff, just
Yeah.
put your cursor on the next line.
Well, and I in my Windows terminal, I have all these different versions of PowerShell installed because I have to document and support all these different versions, right? And so to me, it's important to know what version I'm running in as part of my prompt.
Oh yeah. Especially if you're doing multiple things like that.
Yeah.
All right. We got a serious question from Judd. Serious question. I think it is though. How do you avoid scope pollution?
So we talked about that, and that's let me unfold all, and you'll see. Well, that was one example. So anytime I have I'm creating a variable, like these are environment variables, so that doesn't count. But like this key map, that's a variable that's only used within the context of the script. So I'm putting it inside rather than having this just inline in the script. I put it inside curly braces, which puts it inside of a new script block. So now the scope has changed to the scope of the script block, and I'm using the ampersand to invoke the script block. And so this variable only exists for the duration of the script block. The other way you can do things is, well, like that one is a global variable, and I'm specifically calling out that it's a global variable and that I want to alter it. And if you used, you could put global there, or you could say script. But if you're using the script label on your variable, since your profile script is essentially .sourced, the script scope is global scope. So that doesn't buy you anything. So I use script blocks like this to provide closures around essentially temporary variables.
Awesome. Well, that's a lot of great information. And just a reminder to people, if you want to dive deeper, you want to check out the presentation, it has been linked in the chat. Scroll to the top and you will find that. Sean on IT.
Yep. And Dustin, to answer your question, this Justin is correct. It was one frustration at a time. this profile script developed over a couple of years of trying to hone my profile script. I used to put all of my helper functions that I've written in my profile script so that they would be loaded when my profile loads. And I pulled all of those out and created modules for them. And then I just load the modules. And I only load the modules that are immediately, the ones I use the most immediately needed. So I don't need to load all of my utility modules because PowerShell will load them on demand when I try to run one of those commands. So you see, if we looked for import module, I'm only importing, and I'm conditionally importing just a handful of modules here. This is where I load the ones that I use the most.
And I think a good approach for profiles is build it out over time. If you have a workflow improvement, if you have a setting you want to change in PS Readline, whatever it is, add it to your profile so you don't forget about it and just allow it to grow over time. If you write it in this sort of distributable way where you're checking for the OS and the version of PowerShell, you can take it with you across multiple places, upload it on Git, share it with the world potentially. Well,
So, like I said, all of this is covered here in my presentation, and the last page is links. So the demo script I used is right here. This is my example profile. I have a separate profile for VS Code. We looked at that. What it does, my profile for VS Code loads this import command suite, which is a module from Seemingly Science, Patrick Meineke, that adds functionality to VS Code. And then I dot source my my main profile.
awesome. Well, I think that is the end of the questions. Sean, another PowerShell Wednesday in the books. Thank you for your glorious presentation. A lot of new things. I learned a thing or two along the way. And I think I need to spend some more time on my profile and making sure it's a little bit more distributable because I might move back to Windows. You never know. Quick teaser for next week. Stephen Judd will be joining us to talk about scopes, how you can avoid pollution. And the presentation will explain how PowerShell uses scopes to protect itself from conflicts and pollution. This is key knowledge if you're writing scripts and functions in PowerShell, and it really is, especially if you've never encountered it before. Even just knowing the syntax of, global colon, script colon, why you should probably avoid global at certain times, and be very mindful if you do tend to modify it like Sean did earlier. But thank you everybody for joining us. We will see you next week, every single Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Sean, do you have a message for the people out there? What's their action? What should they do next?
Well, go experiment with your profile. It's a great way to learn scripting. Is when you're scripting for yourself is the best way to learn scripting.
Iterate over time, grow
Yep.
with us. If you have questions, ask. Don't be, stuck on a problem for too long. Give us a chance to help you out. We love seeing people grow in their PowerShell journeys. So thank you to everybody for joining us today. And everyone, if you're a first time attendee, we appreciate you. All right, Sean. Well, I got to drop, but thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.